Nari spent 2 days assembling the transmission. She connected the portable array to the station's data cores. She powered everything with the emergency batteries and hoped they would last long enough to send the message. The transmission had to be perfect. She could not afford mistakes. This was her one chance to tell humanity about the Volkai, to prove they existed, to save an entire civilization. She started with the facts, scientific data, temperature readings showing the impossible heat signatures deep in the ice, geological surveys proving the existence of the vast cave networks, chemical analysis of the fungi gardens and the glowing crystals. Then she showed the Volkai themselves, hours of video footage, the creatures moving through their city, tending their young, creating their vibration language, building structures, making art. Every piece of evidence showed one truth. These were not animals. These were people. She included her analysis of their language, the complex patterns, the three-dimensional nature of their communication. She showed how they taught their children, how they shared knowledge, how they remembered their history through carved ice sculptures. She documented their philosophy of shared warmth, how their entire society was built on cooperation and mutual support, how they had saved her life without hesitation, how they had risked everything to help her retrieve this equipment. And finally, she added her personal testimony. She looked into the camera, exhausted and desperate, and spoke directly to anyone who would listen. My name is Nari. I am a xenobiologist stranded on Kiorim 7. What I'm about to tell you will change everything we think we know about life in the universe. This planet is not dead. It is home to an intelligent species called the Volkai. They are sophisticated. They are kind. They are people. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. In 2 months, a mining fleet will arrive here. They plan to strip mine this world for water and minerals. They do not know the Volkai exist. If they begin operations, they will destroy the cave networks. They will collapse the cities. They will kill everyone who lives here. Her voice grew stronger. I cannot let that happen. I will not let that happen. I stand with the Volkai. This world is not empty. It is home. And I am asking humanity to recognize that, to honor that, to prove that we are capable of seeing sentience in forms that do not look like us. She leaned closer to the camera. The mining fleet will arrive before rescue can reach me. When they do, I will still be here. I will be standing with the Volkai. If they want to mine this world, they will have to go through me first. And the universe will be watching. She ended the transmission and added every piece of evidence she had collected. Then she sent it. Not just to Earth. Not just to the colonial authority. She broadcast it on every frequency, every channel, every communication network humanity used. The message went out into the void. 20 hours to reach Earth. Then however long it took for people to decide, to respond, to act. She had done everything she could. Now she had to wait. Minji sat beside her, tails wrapped around her feet. The gesture had become familiar, comforting. Nari reached down and touched one of the tails gently. Minji responded with a soft vibration. Trust, friendship, family. The response came faster than expected. 14 hours after her broadcast, messages started flooding in. Hundreds of them, then thousands. Her transmission had reached Earth and spread across every human settlement in known space. The first message was from Jiho. His face appeared on the screen and he looked terrified. Nari, what have you done? The corporations are furious. They are saying you are suffering from isolation psychosis. They claim the videos are faked. They are threatening legal action. He paused, and something changed in his expression. Pride, determination. But the scientific community believes you. We have analyzed your data. It is real. All of it. You have discovered the first truly alien intelligence, the first other civilization. This is the most important moment in human history. More messages came. Other scientists supporting her. Religious leaders calling for protection of the Volkai. Politicians demanding investigation before mining. But also angry messages. Corporation officials threatening her. People calling her a liar. A fraud. A traitor to humanity's economic interests. The controversy exploded across human space. Some called her a hero, others called her an obstacle. Everyone had an opinion. Then came a message from her brother. Taiyang's face filled the screen. "Nari, I am coming. I stole a fast courier ship. I will reach you before the mining fleet. Hold on." Nari closed her eyes. Her brother was risking everything for her. But even his fast ship would take weeks to arrive. 6 days later, the mining fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 5 massive ships appeared in orbit around Curium 7. They were early, much earlier than expected. Nari received a transmission immediately. A man's face appeared, hard eyes, military bearing. "This is Captain Wu of the mining vessel Prosperity. We are here to extract you and begin operations. Prepare for pickup," Nari responded calmly. "Captain Wu, I am not leaving, and you cannot begin mining. This planet is inhabited. I sent evidence to Earth. They must have received it by now." Wu's expression did not change. "We received notice of your transmission. It has been reviewed by corporate legal. They have determined that your evidence is insufficient to halt operations. Mining will proceed as scheduled." Insufficient? Nari felt anger rising. "I sent hours of video evidence, scientific data, proof of an intelligent civilization." "What you sent," Wu said coldly, "is footage of cave-dwelling animals with interesting behavior. That does not constitute sentience under colonial authority law. We have our contract, we have our orders, and we have a schedule to keep." He leaned forward. "Dr. Nari, I am giving you one chance. Accept extraction now. Go home. Or I will classify you as mentally unfit and extract you by force. Either way, the mining begins in 48 hours. The transmission ended. Nari stared at the blank screen, shaking with rage and fear. They were going to do it. They were going to destroy everything. Minji touched her arm. The Volkai felt her distress. The other 4 gathered close, and through vibrations, they asked what Nari needed. She showed them the ships in orbit, explained what was coming. The drilling, the destruction, the end of their world. The 5 Volkai touched tails, communicating in patterns too complex for Nari to fully understand. Then Minji created a simple vibration. The pattern that meant together. The pattern that meant stand. They would stand with her, against ships, against mining equipment, against humanity's greed. But 5 Volkai and 1 human could not stop a mining fleet. Nari made a decision. She activated her suit's camera, set it to broadcast continuously. Then she walked to the surface with the 5 Volkai following. She positioned herself at the main mining site, the place where the first drill would penetrate, and she sat down. The Volkai formed a circle around her, their tails intertwining, creating a living barrier. She activated the broadcast. "This is Dr. Nari. I am on the surface of Curium 7 with 5 members of the Volkai people. We are at the primary mining site. If the fleet wants to begin operations, they will have to drill through us first. I invite the universe to watch. Let humanity decide what it wants to be." The broadcast went live across every network. Millions watched within minutes. Nari sat on the ice as the wind screamed around her. The Volkai kept her warm with their tails. And together they waited. Above them, the mining ships orbited. Inside those ships, Captain Wu faced an impossible choice. Proceed with operations and become the man who murdered a human and 5 aliens on live broadcast, or stop and lose billions in corporate investment. On Earth, protests erupted. People filled the streets demanding protection for the Volkai. Scientists published papers supporting Nari's evidence. Religious leaders called for compassion. But corporations fought back. They had lawyers, they had money, they had contracts, and they had 48 hours to make a decision that would define humanity's future among the stars. Nari sat in the cold and watched the sky. Somewhere up there, her brother was racing to reach her. Somewhere out there, humanity was deciding what kind of species it wanted to be. She reached down and touched Minji's tail. The Volkai responded with the vibration pattern that meant warmth. That meant hope. That meant together. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Human and alien. Different species. Same choice. Stand for what was right, even when the cost was everything. The cold wind blew. The warm tales remained. And the universe watched to see what humanity would choose. Nari spent 3 days documenting everything. She recorded the Volkai's language patterns, their architecture, their social structures. She filmed their daily routines, how they tended the glowing crystals that provided heat, how they harvested the fungi gardens in the deeper caves, how they cared for their young, entire communities sharing warmth to keep the children alive. But her equipment was failing. The datapad's battery was dying. Her recording devices were running out of storage. She needed the equipment back at the research station. The main data cores, the backup transmission array, the high-resolution cameras. Everything she needed to prove the Volkai's sentience was 3 kilometers away, across the killing cold. In a station that was probably frozen solid by now. She sat in the central chamber with Minji and explained the problem through pictures and vibrations. She showed images of her station, drew diagrams in the ice showing the distance, made gestures to indicate cold, danger, death. Minji understood. The creature's response was immediate. She would go with Nari. They all would. The 5 who had saved her would help her retrieve what she needed. Nari shook her head frantically. She showed them temperature readings. Minus 170 degrees. She showed them time limits. 6 hours maximum survival in her suit. The Volkai generated heat, but could they generate enough to survive on the surface? Minji placed both her tails on the ground and created a vibration pattern. It was complex, but Nari had learned enough to understand the meaning. Together, warmth shared. Survival as one. The next morning they prepared. The 5 Volkai gathered supplies, strips of dried fungi, containers of water frozen into portable ice. And they did something Nari had never seen before. They called other Volkai from the city. 20 creatures came. They surrounded the 5 who would make the journey. And they began to share warmth. Their tails intertwined, creating a network of heat transfer. They were charging Minji, Hana, Suji, Yuna, and Sora, filling them with thermal energy like living batteries. The process took hours. When it was complete, the 5 travelers glowed softly. Their crystalline fur radiated heat. They had enough warmth stored to survive the surface. For a while, Nari checked her suit one final time. Oxygen full. Heating elements charged. Emergency beacon active. She looked at the 5 Volkai who were risking their lives to help her. Aliens who owed her nothing. Who she had known for less than 2 weeks. Why were they doing this? She asked Minji through vibrations. Minji's response was simple. The pattern that meant cold, followed by the pattern that meant together. Alone in the cold, everyone dies. Together there is warmth. There is life. It was their entire philosophy expressed in 2 simple concepts. They left at dawn. The journey across the ice was brutal. The wind screamed. The temperature was death. Nari's suit strained to keep her alive. Beside her, the 5 Volkai moved in a formation she had never seen. They formed a chain. Each creature's tails connected to the one in front and behind, creating a living rope of shared warmth. Minji led. Hana followed. Then Suji. Then Yuna. Sora was last, and her rear tails wrapped around Nari's waist, tethering the human to their chain. The warmth flowing through the chain was incredible. Nari could feel it through her suit. The Volkai were cycling their thermal energy, each one generating heat and passing it through the network. No single creature bore the full burden of staying warm. They shared it. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was the most profound example of cooperation Nari had ever witnessed. They walked for 2 hours. The research station appeared like a ghost in the white. Dark, silent, frozen. Nari's heart sank. It looked dead. They reached the airlock. Nari's hands shook as she entered the override codes. The door was frozen shut. She pushed, pulled, nothing. Minji moved forward. All 5 Volkai pressed their tails against the door. Heat flowed. Ice melted. Steam hissed. The door groaned, and slowly, agonizingly, it opened. They went inside. The station was a tomb. Everything was frozen. The walls were covered in frost. Nari's breath was visible even inside. The heating had failed completely. Without her suit, she would have minutes to live. She moved quickly through the station. Main data core. She disconnected it carefully. Backup drives. Camera equipment. The portable transmission array. Everything went into a storage container that Yuna carried. She was about to leave when she remembered something. The sample freezer. She had been studying extremophile organisms before the accident. Ice samples from Curim 7's surface. She had never analyzed them thoroughly. She opened the freezer. Inside were dozens of containers. She grabbed them all and added them to Yuna's pack. They might be useful as evidence of the planet's complex ecosystem. They were leaving when it happened. A groaning sound filled the station. Deep, ominous. Nari knew that sound. It was the sound of ice expanding, of metal failing, of a structure about to collapse. "Run!" she screamed, even though the Volkai could not hear her. She pointed to the airlock and sprinted. Minji understood. They all did. The chain reformed instantly. They ran together toward the exit. Behind them, the station's ceiling cracked. Chunks of ice fell. A support beam gave way. The entire structure was coming down, crushed by the weight of ice that had accumulated during weeks of failure. They reached the airlock. Suji went through. Yuna followed. Then it happened. A massive ice chunk fell from above. It was going to crush Nari. She saw it happening in slow motion. Too fast to dodge. Too big to survive, Hana leaped. The Volkai threw herself between Nari and the falling ice. The chunk hit Hana's back with a sickening crack. The creature collapsed. Time stopped. Nari stared at Hana's still form. The Volkai's tails were limp. No heat radiated from her body. She was unconscious, maybe dying. Minji made a sound unlike any vibration Nari had heard before. It was grief, pain, loss. The other three Volkai surrounded Hana. Their tails wrapped around her, pouring heat into her body desperately. More ice was falling. They had seconds. Nari made a decision. She had medical training, basic field surgery. She could not let Hana die. Not after the Volkai had saved her so many times. She grabbed Hana's front limbs. "Help me carry her," she shouted. She demonstrated lifting. Minji understood immediately. They worked together. Nari and Minji carried Hana's torso. Suji and Yuna carried her rear limbs. Sora grabbed the equipment pack and led the way. They ran from the collapsing station. Behind them, metal screeched and ice thundered. The entire structure folded in on itself like paper. They ran until they could not hear the destruction anymore. Then they collapsed on the ice, forming a protective circle around Hana. Nari examined the injured Volkai with shaking hands. There was a crack in Hana's crystalline fur, not deep but significant. Nari could see blue fluid seeping out. Blood. Alien blood, but blood nonetheless. She pulled out her medical kit. Her hands were steady despite her fear. She cleaned the wound with antiseptic. She applied a bonding gel designed for sealing cracks in thermal suits. It might work on crystalline fur. It had to work. She wrapped the wound with insulating material. Then she placed her own thermal pack against Hana's body. Her suit could spare it. She would get cold, but Hana needed the heat more. The other Volkai watched intently. They were learning, seeing human medicine for the first time, understanding that humans too could heal, could share, could sacrifice for others. Hana's eyes opened slowly. Her tails twitched. She was alive. Weak but alive. Minji pressed her head against Nari's helmet. The vibration was clear. Gratitude, respect, recognition that Nari had saved one of their own just as they had saved her. The journey back to the caves took 4 hours. They moved slowly, carefully, protecting Hana. When they finally reached the entrance, dozens of Volkai were waiting. They surrounded Hana immediately, sharing warmth, healing her with their collective heat. Nari collapsed in the entry chamber. She was exhausted, freezing, but victorious. She had the equipment, she had the evidence, and she had proven something important. Humans and Volkai were not so different. Both species understood sacrifice. Both understood that some things were worth risking everything for. Both understood that survival was not about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about being willing to share warmth in the cold. Nari lived with the creatures for 3 days before she truly understood them. The 5 who had saved her took turns keeping her warm, their tails wrapped around her feet and hands while she slept. They brought her strange food from deeper in the caves, crystalline fungi that glowed softly and tasted like sweet minerals. It was not much, but it kept her alive. On the 3rd day, she made a breakthrough. She was sitting with her hand pressed flat against the ice floor, feeling the vibrations the creatures made. Minji sat across from her, creating patterns. Nari had been trying to understand the language, but it had seemed impossible. Too complex, too alien. Then she realized something. The patterns were not just sound. They were three-dimensional. The vibrations traveled through the ice in layers, creating shapes and textures that her ears could not hear, but her body could feel. She closed her eyes and focused on the sensation. The vibrations formed pictures in her mind. Not words, but concepts, feelings, intentions. Minji was telling her a story. About the long dark, about sleeping in the deep ice while the world froze, about waking to vibrations from the sky. The crashed supply ship. Its impact had woken them decades early from their hibernation. Nari opened her eyes. Tears froze on her cheeks. "You were sleeping," she said aloud, even though Minji could not understand the words. "My accident woke you up." "I am sorry." Minji moved closer. Her tails wrapped around Nari's hands gently. The vibration changed, became softer. It was forgiveness, acceptance. The creatures did not blame her. Over the next week, Nari learned more. She discovered that the creatures hibernated in deep ice for 50-year periods. This was how they survived Kurim-7's brutal winters, when the planet moved furthest from its sun. During the brief warm periods, which lasted only a few years, they emerged to reproduce and replenish their food stores, but they had been woken early. The hibernation cycle was broken. If they went back to sleep now, they might not wake up at all. The planet was still in deep winter. There was no food growing, no warmth returning. They were trapped between staying awake and slowly starving or sleeping and risking death. They were dying, slowly, just like her. Nari showed them more images on her datapad. She explained through pictures and gestures what humans were, where she came from, why she was here. The creatures absorbed every detail with hunger. They had never known that other worlds existed. Other species, other forms of life. She showed them fire. The concept fascinated them. Heat without life. Heat created by consuming matter. They had no fire. They generated heat from within their own bodies. A biological process they had refined over millions of years of evolution. One day, Hana brought her to a chamber filled with carved ice sculptures. They were beautiful and intricate. Images of the creatures in various poses. Scenes of their life above the ice during the warm times. Hunts, gatherings, celebrations. But what struck Nari most was a series of carvings showing the sky, positions of stars, patterns of constellations. The creatures understood astronomy. They tracked the seasons by the stars. They knew their planet's orbit. They were not primitive. They were sophisticated observers of their world. She spent hours with Hana in that chamber, learning the stories behind each sculpture. Through vibrations and gestures, Hana explained their history, their culture, their understanding of warmth as the fundamental force of life. The creatures had a philosophy. Warmth was sacred. It was not meant to be hoarded but shared. Every member of their society contributed warmth to the collective. The strong helped the weak. The healthy warmed the sick. Children were kept warm by entire communities, not just parents. It was why they had saved her. She was cold. Therefore they warmed her. It was that simple, that fundamental to who they were. Nari thought about humanity, about how humans often hoarded resources, how the rich stayed warm while the poor froze, how nations fought over energy sources. She felt ashamed and proud at the same time. Ashamed of her species' flaws, but proud that she had a chance to learn from these remarkable people. On the 10th day, her datapad received a transmission. The signal was weak, delayed, but it reached her in the caves. It was from Jiho. His face appeared on the screen, grainy and distorted. "Nari, I have news. A corporate mining fleet is en route to Kurim-7. They will arrive in 2 months. I tried to delay them, but the contract was already signed. They plan to begin operations immediately upon arrival. Extensive drilling and extraction." Nari's blood went cold. 2 months. They had 2 months before the mining began. Jiho continued. "Your brother Taeyang is still trying to arrange a rescue, but the fleet will reach you first. They will extract you before beginning operations. Hold on a little longer. Help is coming." The transmission ended. Nari stared at the blank screen. Help was coming, but it was not help. It was destruction. Minji touched her arm. The creature felt Nari's distress through the vibrations in her body. Tension, fear, anger, emotions translated through the ice. Nari pulled up images of mining equipment. Massive drills, excavators, industrial machinery. She showed them to Minji, then made gestures to indicate destruction. The breaking of ice, the collapse of tunnels, Minji understood. Her tails went rigid. The vibrations she sent through the ice were harsh and alarmed. She called the others. Hanasuji, Yuna, and Sora gathered around. Nari showed them all what was coming. The creatures huddled together, their tails intertwining. The vibrations they created were complex and urgent. They were discussing, debating, deciding. Finally, Minji turned to Nari. The vibration pattern was clear. A question. Would Nari help them? Nari looked at the 5 creatures who had saved her life, who had shared their warmth without asking for anything in return, who had shown her kindness that crossed the barrier between species. She had a choice. She could stay silent, let the rescue happen, let the mining fleet extract her and begin their operations. She would survive. She would go home, but these people would die. Their city would be destroyed. Their culture would be erased. All because humanity did not know they existed, or she could speak. She could tell the universe about the Volkai, about their civilization, about their right to exist. It would be dangerous. The corporations were powerful. They would not want to lose the mining contract. They might accuse her of lying, of suffering from isolation psychosis. They might try to silence her, but she was a scientist. She had evidence. She had recordings. She had proof. And more importantly, she had a conscience. Nari placed her hand flat on the ice and created vibrations of her own. Clumsy and crude compared to the Volkai's sophisticated language, but understandable. She vibrated the pattern for yes, a simple up and down pulse that meant agreement, acceptance, promise. She would help them. Whatever it took, Minji's tails wrapped around Nari's hands. The other 4 creatures added their tails, creating a circle of warmth and connection. In that moment, despite their alien forms and incomprehensible biology, they were not so different. They were people. Fighting for survival, fighting for home, fighting for the right to exist in a universe that often forgot that life came in many forms. Nari pulled out her datapad and began composing a message. It would be the most important transmission of her life. It would change everything. But first she needed more evidence, more documentation, more proof. She needed to show the universe not just that the Volkai existed, but that they were worthy of protection. She needed to show humanity its own reflection in these alien eyes, and hope that what they saw was something worth being proud of. The work began. Warmth. That was the first thing Nari felt when she woke. Real warmth, not the artificial heat of her suit's failing systems. She opened her eyes slowly, confused and disoriented. She was lying on something soft, not ice. The material felt like fur, but denser, warmer. Her thermal suit was still intact, but her helmet had been carefully removed. The air around her was cold but breathable. She could see her breath, but she was not freezing. Nari sat up carefully. Her head ached from the fall. She touched her forehead and felt a small bump, but no blood. She was lucky. Very lucky. Then she remembered. The shapes in the darkness, the creatures that had approached her. She looked around frantically. The cavern was larger than she had realized. Glowing crystals embedded in the ice walls provided soft blue light. The space was warm. Not warm like Earth, but warm enough that she would not freeze immediately. Around -20 degrees, she guessed. And she was not alone. 5 creatures sat in a circle around her. They watched her with eyes that caught the crystal light and reflected it back like mirrors. Nari's breath caught in her throat. They were unlike anything she had ever seen. Each creature was about the size of a large dog, but their body structure was completely alien. They had 5 limbs arranged around a central torso. 4 limbs touched the ground, supporting their weight. The 5th extended upward from the center of their back, ending in a cluster of sensory organs. But the most striking feature was their tails. Each creature had 2 tails that moved independently. The tails were thick and covered in the same crystalline fur that covered their bodies. As Nari watched, she realized the tails were generating heat. She could see the air shimmer around them. The creatures made no sound. But Nari felt vibrations through the ground, rhythmic, purposeful. They were communicating. One of them moved closer, slowly, carefully. Its 2 tails extended toward her feet. Nari wanted to pull back, but something stopped her. The creature's movements were gentle, non-threatening. Its eyes showed intelligence and curiosity. The tails touched her boots. Warmth flooded through the material. Her frozen toes began to tingle as blood flow returned. The creature was warming her deliberately. Nari's scientist mind kicked into gear even as her heart raced with fear and wonder. These creatures were intelligent. They had saved her life. They had removed her helmet without damaging it. They had placed her on warm bedding. They were heating her body to prevent hypothermia. They were sentient. "Hello," she whispered. Her voice cracked from disuse and fear. The creatures responded with stronger vibrations. The patterns changed, became more complex. They were trying to communicate. Nari looked at her equipment. Her data pad was still attached to her belt. Damaged but functional. She pulled it out carefully, moving slowly so as not to startle the creatures. They watched with interest as she activated the device. The screen flickered to life. She pulled up her analysis programs. If she could record the vibrations, maybe she could find patterns, language, meaning. She placed the data pad on the ground. The vibrations registered immediately. Complex waveforms scrolled across the screen. Not random. Definitely not random. The patterns repeated with variations, like sentences in an unknown language. One of the creatures moved closer to the datapad. It touched the device with one of its forward limbs. The limb had flexible digits, 3 of them arranged in a triangle. The creature manipulated the screen gently, almost tenderly. Nari pulled up an image file. A picture of Earth from space. Blue oceans. Green continents. White clouds. She showed it to the creature. All 5 creatures gathered around the datapad. Their attention focused completely on the image. The vibrations intensified. Nari felt excitement in the patterns. Wonder. They had never seen anything like Earth. She scrolled through more images. The sun, other planets, space stations, cities, forests, oceans. Each image generated different vibration patterns. The creatures were asking questions. She was sure of it. Nari showed them an image of herself without the suit. A human face, human hands. The creatures studied her carefully. Then they touched her arm gently, comparing the image to reality. Understanding dawned in their crystalline eyes. Hours passed. Nari lost track of time. She was engaged in humanity's first real conversation with an alien species, and it was happening through vibrations and pictures on a half-broken datapad in an ice cave light years from home. She learned that the creatures responded to certain frequencies. Lower vibrations meant something different than higher ones. Short bursts were different from long, sustained pulses. It was language, complex and sophisticated. The creature that had first approached her seemed to be the leader or perhaps just the most curious. Nari decided to name them. She could not pronounce their real names, which were vibration patterns in the ice, but she needed something to call them. She pointed to the leader. "Minji," she said, using her cousin's name. The creature tilted its central sensory cluster and its tail swished. Acceptance, Nari thought. She named the others Hana, Suji, Yuna, and Sora. Each creature seemed to understand that these sounds referred to them specifically. They responded when she said their names. Minji stood and gestured with her central limb. "Follow." Nari understood the meaning clearly despite the lack of words. She stood slowly, testing her legs. The warmth from the creature's tails had restored her circulation. She felt weak but functional. She followed Minji deeper into the cave system. The other 4 creatures flanked her, their tails constantly generating heat. They were keeping her warm deliberately, protecting her from their own world's killing cold. The tunnel opened into an enormous cavern. Nari stopped and stared. It was a city. An alien city hidden in the ice of a dead planet. Structures carved from ice rose from the floor. Not crude caves, but elegant architecture. Smooth curves, precise angles. Decorative patterns etched into every surface, and there were more creatures. Hundreds of them. They moved through the city with purpose. Some tended to glowing crystals that provided light and heat. Others worked on structures. Still others gathered in groups, their vibrations creating harmonies that filled the cavern with music. Nari's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the ice, staring at the impossible sight before her. Curium 7 was not dead. It was not empty. It was home to an entire civilization that humanity had never detected, and she was the first human to see it. Minji sat beside her. The creature's 2 tails wrapped around Nari's feet, providing constant warmth. The gesture was now familiar, comforting. These creatures understood cold. They understood the need for warmth, and they understood that this strange alien visitor would die without help, so they gave it freely, without question. Without hesitation, Nari pulled out her datapad and began recording everything. Every structure, every creature, every vibration pattern. This was the most important discovery in human history, and it was happening to her. But as she recorded, a cold knot of fear formed in her stomach. She remembered something from her mission briefing, something she had not thought about since the accident. Curium-7 was scheduled for mining operations. A corporate fleet was coming to strip mine the ice for water and minerals. The operation would begin in a few months. They did not know about these creatures, these people, and if they arrived and started mining, they would destroy everything. The entire civilization would be wiped out before humanity even knew it existed. Nari looked at Minji, at the city of ice, at the people who had saved her life without knowing who or what she was. She had to stop it. Somehow she had to stop the mining operation, but first she had to survive. Nari pressed her gloved hand against the frozen window and watched her breath fog the glass. Outside, the ice planet stretched endlessly in every direction. White, silent, dead. She had been alone on Curium-7 for 43 days, and the cold was winning. The research station groaned around her. Metal contracted in the brutal temperature. The heating system made clicking sounds that grew longer each day. Nari knew what those sounds meant. The system was dying, just like everything else on this frozen rock. She walked to the communications panel and checked for messages. The screen showed the same thing it had shown for weeks. No new transmissions. The delay from Earth was 20 hours each way. Even if someone answered her distress call right now, she would not hear back until tomorrow. And rescue would take 8 months to arrive. 8 months. She had food for 3 more months. The heating would fail in less than 2. Nari sat down and pulled her jacket tighter. The station was already getting colder. She could see her breath inside now. Last week she could not. The mathematics were simple and cruel. She would freeze before she starved. Her datapad beeped. A message from Earth finally. She opened it quickly. Nari, this is Jiho. We received your distress call. I am working on moving the rescue timeline forward, but there are complications. The solar flare that destroyed your supply ship also damaged 2 other vessels in the sector. Resources are stretched thin. I need you to hold on. Your brother Taiyang is trying to arrange something private. Stay strong. We are coming. Nari closed her eyes. Stay strong. Easy words from someone sitting in a warm office on Earth Station. She wanted to be angry, but Jiho was doing his best. Everyone was. It was not enough, but they were trying. She stood up and walked to the equipment locker. If the heating failed completely, staying in the station meant certain death. She needed a backup plan. The survey data showed ice caves 3 kilometers south. Some of the readings had been strange. Thermal signatures that did not match the frozen surface. She had planned to investigate them before the accident, but there had been no time. Now she had nothing but time. Time that was running out. Nari pulled on her thermal suit. The thick material was designed to keep a human alive for 6 hours in Curium-7's killing cold. 6 hours. After that, the cold would seep through any protection. It would freeze her blood, her bones, her thoughts. She checked her equipment 3 times. Oxygen tank, emergency beacon, sample containers, thermal scanner, climbing gear, everything she might need to explore the caves, everything she might need to survive one more day. The airlock hissed open. Cold air rushed in like a living thing, hungry and angry. Nari stepped out into the white hell. The wind hit her immediately. It screamed across the ice plains, carrying crystals that scratched against her helmet. The thermal suit's heating elements kicked in, fighting to maintain her body temperature. She could already feel the cold pressing against her like a physical weight. Nari started walking south. Each step was carefully placed. The ice was slippery and treacherous. A fall could crack her suit. A crack meant death in minutes. The research station disappeared behind her. She was alone in the white. The only sound was her breathing inside the helmet and the crunch of ice under her boots. The sky above was a pale gray, no sun. Curium-7 was too far from its star to see it clearly, just a dim point of light that provided almost no warmth. After 2 hours, she saw the cave entrance. It was a dark hole in a hillside of ice, like a mouth waiting to swallow her. Her thermal scanner showed something strange. The temperature inside was higher than outside. Not warm, but less cold. -100 degrees instead of -170. That should not be possible. There was no geothermal activity on Curium-7. The planet was geologically dead. Nari approached the cave carefully. She turned on her helmet light. The beam cut through the darkness, showing ice walls that glittered like diamonds. The cave was larger than she expected. The ceiling was high. The floor sloped downward into deeper darkness. She checked her oxygen. 4 hours remaining, enough time to explore and return. She stepped inside. The cave was beautiful. The ice reflected her light in 1,000 directions. Colors appeared in the walls. Blue, green, purple. Trapped gases frozen millions of years ago. She took samples automatically, her scientist training overriding her fear. The tunnel sloped deeper. The temperature rose slowly. -90, -80. Still deadly cold, but the change was significant. Something was generating heat down here. Nari followed the tunnel for 30 minutes. It twisted and turned through the ice. Several times she had to squeeze through narrow passages. Her thermal scanner showed the heat source was ahead, getting stronger. Then she heard it. A sound that was not the wind. Not ice cracking. Something else. Something alive. She stopped walking. Her heart pounded. There was no life on Curium-7. The planet had been surveyed thoroughly. Nothing lived here. Nothing could live here. The sound came again. A vibration that traveled through the ice itself. Like music, but lower than human hearing. She felt it in her bones more than heard it. Nari's hands shook. She should turn back. She should run to the station. But the station was dying, and her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She had always been this way. It was why she became a scientist. It was why she volunteered for this mission. She kept walking forward. The tunnel opened into a larger cavern. Her helmet light swept across the space. The walls were covered in strange patterns. Not natural ice formations. Something else. Something deliberately made, and then she saw them. 5 shapes in the darkness. Not human. Not anything she recognized. They were watching her. Nari's legs went weak. She stumbled backward. Her boots slipped on the ice. She fell hard, her head hitting the inside of her helmet. Pain exploded behind her eyes. The world tilted and spun. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was the 5 shapes moving closer, not threatening, curious, and impossibly their approach brought warmth with it. Real warmth in this frozen hell than nothing.